Dobbiamo prendere posto, lasciamo. Unfortunately, I had to go to my director, and so I asked Professor Violini, Professor Violini, who is working this morning. I hope to come back as soon as possible. Welcome to Milan.
So, thank you, Marilisa. It's a great pleasure for me to chair this session with such prominent people and women, men and women. So, I'm not very good in translating our gender language in English. I need to think a little bit about it. Yeah, I don't think so, but nonetheless, we can all. We didn't have a gender language also in Italian, but now. So first of all, the floor for introductions will. I give the floor for the introduction to Professor Maria Pia Bracchio. She is the director of our university, and she is a full professor of pharmacology at our university. Maria Pia Bracchio, the floor is yours.
Very much, Lorenza. And I'm really very honored to welcome you all at this second day of the meeting organized within the activities of the Jean Monnet European Fundamental Rights and Human Rights Chair, given to Professor Maria D'Amico, or she's gone away. Okay. And I take this chance to convey my very best wishes and welcome to Professor Nicola Zanon, Vice President of the Constitutional Court of the Italian Republic, to Professor Marilisa D'Amico, to all our guests today, to Professor Lorenzo Violini, who is chairing this session, and I warmly thank both Marilisa and Benedetta Liberali for all the work that they have done to be here today and to invite me. Thank you very much. It's a very great chance. Well, the 2022 Gender Equality Index, published by the European Institute for Gender Equality on the occasion of the 2023 International Women's Day on March the 8th, found that due to the impact of the COVID pandemic and also to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, progress on gender equality is at risk. And the gender equality at work and in knowledge access stagnated or even regressed compared to previous years in most European Union countries. Moreover, the report also underscores a significant gender salary gap that persists in several sectors and seriously affects the ICT sector in particular, that also faces an unprecedented gender talent gap and shortage of women ICT professionals, as we have clearly heard yesterday at this meeting. Women are among the most badly affected by the conflict in Ukraine, either as victims, direct victims of war crimes, or as part of the population mostly exposed to food and energy deprivation, health risks, job losses, and increased burden of family care due to the absence of men sent to the front line. Only one positive consequence of this situation has been, in 2022, the gain made by women in the political power domain, with increases in women representations in the European Parliament, in regional local assemblies, and in the number of women leaders, such as heads of state governments, prime ministers, and ministers in general, who have reacted with a strong determination and commitment to the respect of the international principles and international laws for both the war and other situations that are continuously putting women's rights at risk. Defense of human rights and gains in human rights are particularly delicate issues and are particularly fragile. Often, women's violations are presented as harmless measures, such as, for example, protection of family and children, protection of societal or religious traditions, and our recent history is full of examples of this kind of political control of women's rights throughout the world. Iran's morality police have brutally reinforced hijab laws on women, and Russia and Turkey are deliberately walking back protections against domestic violence. In Afghanistan, Taliban are once again denying girls' education, women's work, and most basic freedoms. Chinese government policies treat women as wolves, subject to forced abortion or forced pregnancies, depending on the needs of the country. And even in civilized Europe, political control over cows has resulted in a decrease of human rights. In 2020, Poland's constitutional tribunal virtually banned legal abortion, not to mention the USA, where last June, in June 2022, the US Supreme Court eliminated the constitutional protection of abortion rights, basically overturning almost 50 years of jurisprudence. It is of these days, very recent days, the news in the media of the women in Texas forced to continue pregnancy despite fatal fetal abnormalities, putting their life at risk, which led one pregnant woman to declare, "I will have to give birth to my child to bury him or her immediately after." Thus, I really wanted to make, mine this statement recently given by an American activist, Macarian Science, at Yale Law School, who stated that the fight for women's rights is a fight against authoritarianism. When government tell women what they can go, where they can go, whom they can or must go with, what they must wear, what they can say and what they cannot say, whether they can be pregnant or not, these are clear signs of authoritarianism. This is the reason why this meeting is so important today. It's so important to protect democratic countries from authoritarian grips and avoid political interventions over human legal rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pia, for mentioning such a dramatic situation. all over the world, even though we know that progress has been made under several aspects in women's life. Now the floor is to Professor Nicola Zanon, which is Vice President of the Constitutional Court in Italy, and it's very nice for him to be with us because I know that he's very busy, decisions that are very important for our country, and therefore thank you him very, very warmly and give the floor.
Thank you, Lawrence. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me today. Thank you to Professor D'Amico for the organized this important meeting. The topic of the conference touches upon one of the most crucial aspects of our constitutional principle of equality between men and women, which in Italy is explicitly based on various provisions of the Italian Constitution. First of all, as you know, Article 3, but also Articles 29, 37, 48, and 51. Many speeches that have been made yesterday and that will be presented today cover many areas in which the principle of equality is being implemented, such as artificial intelligence, the labor market, presence of women in the political sphere, constitutional part of it. These fields, as well, there are still a lot of loose ends, and that effectively prevents the achievement of the proper balance between equality and democracy, which the Constitution itself proposes. From the perspective of the constitutional adjudication, my perspective, it's just my perspective. It's not a universal perspective, but it's the perspective of the constitutional judge. Just a couple of words on two different cases coming from very different countries and from different courts. Two examples coming from the United States and from Italy. And I shall confine myself here to emphasize just one profile. And these two examples are used from my perspective. And profile is particularly important for the subject of today's debate. I'm referring to the relationship between the boundaries of the text of the Constitution, the boundaries of jurisdictional activism. The strict overlapping of these two boundaries determines the two different approaches adopted by constitutional courts in the European context. My court belongs to this kind of approach, and by the United States Supreme Court, as you know. First example, Dobbs, that you mentioned just a moment ago. The U.S. Supreme Court and the right of abortion in the USA. Speaking about Dobbs, I'm very careful. We may think, on one hand, that the tendency to prioritize text-based interpretations and responses, as shown Dobbs, have the consequence of undermining some rights of women, right to have an abortion, because this right, because this right is not written in the Constitution. And the solution given by Roe in 1973, case in the 90s, never gave an universal. So you can think about an undermining of women's rights. But on the other hand, we shouldn't forget that those interpretations can advance democratic process, where properly different constitutional rights and interests must be balanced. The last word, the opinion, majority opinion does say, I'm quoting, abortion presents a profound moral question. The Constitution does not prohibit the citizens of each state from regulating or prohibiting abortion. Roe and Casey advocated that the court overrules those decisions and returns that authority to the people and their elected representatives. I'd like to add something to it. Important to say that the people vote and women are the majority. Okay? This is first perspective. I don't want to assess this perspective. I just want to make it clear for your audience. On a very different perspective, let's now take a look to an Italian case in which judicial activism of my own court is very clear. The important case I'm referring to is the case on the automatic attribution of the patronymic. Italian legislation automatically assigned to newborn children only the father's surname. It's an issue, as you understand, as you know, involves tradition, culture, evolving standards of decency that mark the progress of a maturing society. That's a quotation from the Supreme Court of the 70s. And involves the Constitution, the text of the Constitution. How a court has to deal with social changes when having to interpret unchanged old laws under the Constitution and under the principle of equality between men and women. In this case, the example is the opposite of the Supreme Court. Maybe you know that this issue was self-referred by the Italian Constitutional Court. Order number 18 of 2021 and judgment number 131 2022. I mean, in this case, my court decided to choose its own docket. It's true that on this topic, my court had already led a significant step in 2016, with its ruling number 286. In this judgment, my court declared unconstitutional the implicit rule deduced from a complex of provisions, civil code and other provisions, insofar as indeed allow spouses by joint agreement to transmit at the time of birth of their children also their mother's surname. And the reason that lead to the decision are based on the infringement of the principle of equality and equal moral and legal dignity of spouses, which found that spouses do not absolute patriarchal conception of the family and relation between them. But in 2021, my court dealt with this issue again. Third judge rose the question of constitutionality in order to assess whether the backward spouses assigning only the mother's surname was still in conformity with the Italian Constitution, always assuming that this choice had been made by mutual agreement between the two parents. Specifically, parent court requested additive ruling, the contents of which would create a radical exception to the general rule under which children are automatically given their father's surname. And at the end, both questions raised have been declared unconstitutional by the court, stating that children have to take all the parents' surnames in the order agreed upon by them. Obviously, if both parents agree, they can assign only one family name, the name of the man. They decide so. So as you see two very different approaches to these issues, in which on one side you have political question, political debate, political process. United States political process decide. If the Constitution is unclear, if the Constitution is unclear or decided. But on the other side, when the Constitution is clear, the Supreme Court says, okay, I have to respect the Constitution. In Italy, we had a more activist approach in which we have very clear principle of equality written in the Constitution, but also we, my colleagues in the course, to interpret social changes and adapt the text of the Constitution to those changes. And that's all the problem we are facing. What is the limit of this approach coming from non-elected justices or judges? I have no response. I can't have a response now. It's up to you. And so I stop here. And thank you very much. I hope you can discuss also those kinds of issues. It's the second day of our seminar. Thank you.
Thank you very much to
Thank you very much to Nicola Zanon, Justice, President of GAST. I'd like to say to our foreign guest that our constitutional court has women is very attentive to gender equality, and this is very important also for the decisions that they have to do. And your intervention was very, very challenging, because I know that it is the discussion on the dogs is very strong, is very problematic in the United States, and not very many people in Italy underline that the matter is not to abolish the right of abortion, but is to give the decision to the parliaments of the states. Of course, it depends also from the vision you have on the matter of abortion, and therefore, since we are in a pluralistic society, we have to consider also this way of dealing with the matter. And now I think it's up to me. Okay. So, thank you very much for inviting me to give the speech in such an important conference. And I think it is paper. And I have to talk about women's rights in constitutional law and in comparative perspective. Of course, since I have more or less 20 minutes, I will focus on some aspects of this program subject. And one of the aspects which I want to underline at the beginning of my talk is the fact that effectiveness of human rights is a highly vulnerable aspect of the entire human rights project. A project aiming at a creation of a global landscape that promotes human dignity and social justice. So we face now a big issue on the effectiveness of human rights, and human rights is under pressure, as Professor Grasso said. States and a growing number of scholars challenge the project of human rights on different grounds. States, especially liberal or authoritarian states, have shown reluctancy in accepting the decision of the human rights tribunals as they are suspected to interfere with certain sovereignty. Several scholars have denounced bias, inefficiencies, and the so-called normative imperialism that are frequently present in the human rights arena. Many critics call into question various aspects of the implementation of human rights, such as its bureaucratization and its elitist nature. Samuel Moyn has recently written a book titled, I quote, "Not Enough: Human Rights in an Unequal World." This title clearly reflects the vision according to which, I quote, "the solidarity claimed by the human rights language and the human rights movement remain weak and cheap." So weak and cheap. It's a huge critique to the human rights movement. And while we can all share this view, in fact, we have also to admit that in the past 7 years, the human rights movement, based on treaties and international organizations, as well as on civil society actors, has helped them redress injustices and pursuing, in the long term, the kind of social and fundamental changes that are rarely rapidly achieved. The history of women's rights is an interesting example of the effectiveness of human rights legislation and advocacy. In the Western world, political rights and social change in the area of the women's condition testify that it is possible to achieve important results and to overturn previous injustices based on cultural bias and traditional attitudes and techniques. Gender equality, though never completely achieved, has become a fundamental element for democratic states that are strongly engaged in pursuing this goal. I read in the newspaper this morning that the Parliament has, the European Parliament has enacted a rule about the neutrality of the market when they want to, because they want to really implement and go against the gender pay gap. So a lot of institutions are still working very hard in order to get to the effectiveness of those rights. But under the pressure of human rights movement, legislation has been struck down that prohibited access to profession traditionally monopolized by men, and many obstacles to self-determination have been removed at many levels of social and economic life, from family life to the participation in political parties and in parliamentary and governmental institutions. And together with removing obstacles, national and international legislation positively promotes gender equality. Affirmative action programs have been put in place in order to push the economic system to achieve not only legal but also de facto equality and to abolish discrimination. One may still doubt about the effectiveness of the ground of those programs, but nevertheless, they are undeniable steps forward that challenge provisions of discrimination. So, second point, did the Western world win the battle for equality? Of course not. We have heard that Our constitutional court has taken a decision on the surveying of the family, which is very in favor of equality of rights. But there are other obstacles besides gender pay gap. They are related to the function of women in society, bound to maternity and to the burden of family care that are still matter of concern. And we have to be aware that prejudice and discriminatory attitudes never die, both in older and sometimes also in younger generations. On one hand, family care must be considered in creating and enforcing social rights. Regulation of maternity leave for both mother and father must be present and enforced so that the burden of care is correctly shared by both parents, as well as by the public that have to create sufficient structure for permitting women to combine family care and profession. On the other hand, reproductive matters are on the core of the problem, as the discussion of abortion in Europe and in the US show. These reproductive rights under the point of view of abortion, already mentioned by Professor Zanone, and judicial decisions are discussed by other speakers in this panel, I will focus on a highly disputed issue in Europe, in European countries, and in Italy in particular, that is the issue of surrogacy. Surrogacy. Due to different legislation adopted in different countries, some admitting the technique, others prohibiting it on grounds mainly related to women's dignity, legal disputes arise in countries where the technique is prohibited when couples ask for the recognition and transcription of the civil status of the child acquired abroad, where surrogacy is legal. A recent decision of the Italian Constitutional Court, October 30, 2023, deals with the issue and concludes that in absence of specific legislation that was urged by the European Court and by the Italian Constitutional Court, though dismissing the case, monitor to the legislator, the right of the child must be protected by judges on a case-by-case, very careful decision. On the surrogacy itself, the court strongly affirms the legitimacy of the prohibition by national legislation and dismissed the petitioner's request for direct automatic transcription of the birth, as it happens for bisexual families. The same occurred in France, that also considers surrogacy as being against women's rights and dignity. The analysis of the surrogacy contracts and their enforcement, as well as case law arising in the fields, shows how problematic it is to balance the rights of the intended parents and the dignity of the surrogate mother. See, for example, cases where the surrogate mother was asked to abort one of the twins she was bearing because he was handicapped, or because the intended parent said he was not able to economically support more than one child. In this field, one can easily understand that the protection of the rights of the persons involved in the procedure may clash with the desires of parenthood that some legislation allows to accomplish. And this is why it is reasonable for courts that some states stand on the prohibition of surrogacy. Third point, how about the rest of the world of course, it is impossible to give a full account of what is going on in the global south. But I will focus on two cases, a successful one and unfortunately some very sad cases, not successful. The successful case is Pakistan. The case of Pakistan is used by Grene de Burka in her book of 2023 as a response to the critique of other scholars that are against, that are criticizing the human rights movement. The case, as well as two other examples from Argentina and Ireland that are described in this book. The case of Pakistan illustrates some of the ways in which the international human rights law and advocacy, local advocacy, have been effectively used to advance change around the country. They focus on rights that do not easily fall one or other side of the civil, political, and socio-economic rights divide. And they include gender equality in Pakistan, educational aspects, Argentina, and children's rights in Ireland. In Pakistan, women's group and organization established to promote gender justice repeatedly worked with the Convention of the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, as well as with international and regional networks of support. One may wonder how this has been possible in a context, the Pakistan one, which can be considered a hard case of discrimination on the religious ground. Nonetheless, the Burka identifies three main factors that help explain how the ratification of the convention in Pakistan, that help explain the ratification of the convention in Pakistan and the implementation of several legal reforms addressing gender equality. The three factors are, first, the existence of a substantial and active civil society focused on human rights. Second, the presence of governments open to gender reforms, even if they are moved mostly by the will to maintain a good reputation at international level. And the regular engagement and dialogue with international and external networks and institutions focused on gender issues. So this may be a good example because Pakistan is, as said, a very difficult place where to enforce human rights. Nonetheless, Grene de Burka, which is a very fond supporter of human rights, of the human rights movement, give us this example, and I think we can be thankful for her, to her, that she can help me in understanding the world. But there are a lot of cases that are not successful at all. Here I go back to what our vice rector said about right of education both in Iran and in Afghanistan. Everybody knows what is going on there. And the UN is strongly protesting against the situation both in Afghanistan and in Iran. But there, one really touching discrimination is the fact that girls cannot go to school, and in Iran, when they go to school, are poisoned and they are impaired to achieve what is fundamental for equality, which is education. So I take also some notes, some thoughts, but I think that we can see that the effectiveness of human rights project under the perspective of human rights is still under pressure. International legislation and organization, national legislation and courts, and civil society advocacy are all involved in trying problems arising in different countries. What the Pakistan case may teach to us is that a purely top-down approach in the field of human rights does not suffice if it is not complemented by a bottom-up commitment to the protection of human rights, stemming from the individuals and civil society. But let me close my speech quoting from a recent book from Rubio Marina, which stressed the importance of education. She writes, quoting a sentence from Crystal Eastman, she writes, I quote, "It must be womanly as well as manly to earn your own living, to stand on your own feet. And it must be manly as well as womanly to know how to cook and sew and clean and take care of yourself in an ordinary exigency of life. And we must," she said, "bring up feminist values." And this is a quotation from a feminist. She wrote this in 1920. Francesca, allora, io cambio ancora la taglietta e mi fanno fare dei pittori, non ci sono. Adesso dirò anche allora, tocca a ora recuperare tutti i miei pezzi di carta. Quindi dobbiamo adesso andare avanti. No, we now go ahead in our program, and it is my pleasure to introduce to you Francesca Stati, friend, and we share a lot of chats. I know everything you do. You are very good in announcing your activities, but it is very important because one of the reasons why we have difficulties in participating in the matters in seminars is that simply we don't know that they are online or they are organized. So Francesca Rescigno, Professor of Institutional Public Theology for Opportunity Law at the University of Bologna. She has focused her study, research, and teaching activities mainly on equality and equity issues. She was the only Italian jurist invited to participate in the Second World Animal Law Conference held in Barcelona in 2014. She is author of numerous monographs and publications working on gender mainstreaming, self-determination, and management of women's body, treatment of foreigners, and recognition of the subjectivity of animal beings. I know Francesca loves very much her animals, and we have learned from her that we have to learn animals. I am scared of talking about
They are in the Constitution.
Now they are in the Constitution. I think the most recent publication are per un habeas corpus di genere, salute, autodeterminazione femminile, sex and gender medicine, Napoli 2022. So Francesca, the floor is yours.
I have to announce also your
Francesca will, Professor Reschino will speak to us on the following topic: women's body and health between self-determination and patriarchal legacy, the case of abortion between Italy and the US. And so we will now see the two sides of the coin, which is very difficult from our university, you know. We don't stand on only one foot, we stand on 2 feet.
Thank you, Lorenza, and thank you, everyone. I'm truly delighted by this invitation, and sincerely thanking Marisa. I know he's not here, and Professor Liberali, I can see. But these 2 days are very interesting, so I'm happy to be here. The task I've been entrusted with is really dedicated and of extreme relevance, as I will be speaking to you about women's health and their ability to self-determine the management of their own bodies, focusing particularly on the issue of pregnancy termination. I apologize in advance for my English, not always being up to par, but I hope I can be clear enough in my exposition. My reasoning starts from the right to health, a fundamental right that every human being should be able to enjoy, regardless of his or her sex, gender, race, language, religion, and economic and social status. Unfortunately, we are well aware that the universality of the right to health is still far from being fully achieved, because this right is affected by a series of determinants, defined as health determinants, which make the enjoyment of this right often problematic, if not impossible. Among these determinants, unfortunately not often take into account particularly relevant are sex and gender. As being born a woman is incredibly, perhaps not so much, a negative determinant of health. Women's health, in fact, is penalized not only by the traditional position of economic, social, and labor subordination to which women are subjected in any society, but also because medical science has evolved by elaborating a paradigm that is falsely neutral, but actually masculine, if not chauvinist. Medical science, like all empirical sciences, needed a model to refer to, a prototype to investigate in order to be able to study the functioning of the body, pathologies, and possible cures. And therefore, despite the more than evident diversities existing between women's and men's bodies, it was preferred to investigate only the men's body as a universal paradigm, without worrying whether this would compromise women's health. By acting this way, the physical differences that characterize men and women have been ignored. And at the same time, the gender has also been neglected. This is the so-called Yentl syndrome, highlighted in 1991 by Patricia Haley in her paper. The title is The Yentl Syndrome. In this article, she points out how difficult it is for women to be correctly diagnosed and treated for cardiovascular disease due to the different symptoms they present. Indeed, female patients had to simulate a male symptoms in order to be treated, as otherwise their manifestation of cardiovascular problems would not have been taken seriously. The article had a huge echo, but it was not enough to change a well-established trend. Although it certainly had the merit of raising a problem that did not only concern cardiology, but every field of medicine, and that remains even today. Health, therefore, is a complex good, but it's also a fundamental right that everyone should enjoy. And when we say everyone, we mean all women. Men. Being born a woman, however,
even in 2023, is a negative determinant of health, because economic and social factors weigh on women, also penalizing them in enjoying the right to health, and because medicine itself has decided to create a male model of reference that harms any woman, regardless of her economic and social condition and the place where she was born and grew up. So every time that we think about the universality of the right to health, we should think that even today, women are still many steps behind men. In this discouraging picture, there is one medical field in which women and men have always been considered different and examined and treated with respect for their differences, and that is the field of reproduction and sexual organs. The woman's body, in fact, has only been the subject of a personalized investigation, both from health scientific as well as from a legal point of view, in the context of sexuality-related issues, concerning in particular the capacity to generate life. Unfortunately, the almost obsessive interest shown in the sexual reproductive health of women has almost always translated into an exercise of heteronormative control over the freedom of self-determination of women themselves, who have a priori been considered intrinsically weak and substantially incapable of understanding the best behavior to be adopted in order not to jeopardize their own dignity and that of all other women, if not on the entire human being. The need to self-determine one's body and their choices is of great importance. Decisions no longer belong to doctors or legislators, but to patients. And in this context, the achievement of free informed consent to the medical act represents the fruit of an evolution which, starting from a paternalistic attitude of medicine, has arrived at the so-called therapeutic alliance. However, this capacity for choice and self-determination over the body has developed differently depending on whether the body is that or a man. In particular, motherhood has been studied from a long time and even ruled in an attempt to separate it from the woman herself. But motherhood cannot be considered as something abstract and separate from the woman who is the mother. In the course of time, medical science and positive law regarding motherhood have tried to control, if not even cancel, a woman's capacity for self-determination, almost as if the management of motherhood were too serious an affair to leave it to the discretion of women, traditionally inferior beings. But the management of one's own body and health for women involves the management of motherhood, and so also through the possibility of terminating an unwanted pregnancy. This is where things get complicated. About pregnancy interruption in the Italian legal system, it is useful just to recall the declaration of unconstitutionalities of Article 553 of Penal Code, entitled Incitement to Practices Against Procreation. Under these provisions was the demographic interest of the state, which punished two different types of behavior, namely that of anyone who incited contraceptive practice in public, but also anyone transmitting information aimed at highlighting such practices in a favorable light. So any scientific publication, medical reports, or other types of intervention that support the hypothesis of birth control could be matter for pressing charges. This forecast fully reflected the fascist regime's desire to encourage increase in birth. The question of the compatibility of this provision with the Republican Constitution, and in particular with the freedom of thought under Article 21, led the Constitutional Court declare with sentence number 49 of 1971 the constitutional illegitimacy of Article 553. Though Article 553 having been declared constitutional, Article 546 still remain in force.
punishing the abortion of a consenting woman, even when the continuation of the pregnancy could have endangered the health of the woman herself. Once again, the merit of having overcome this prediction must be acknowledged to the Constitutional Court, which, with the sentence number 27 of 1975, put an end to the nonsense absolute prevalence accorded to the legal position of the conceived, to the detriment even of the mother's right to life and death. It is the judgment they paved the way for the approval of Law 194 of 1978. Contains norms for the social protection of maternity and the voluntary interruption of pregnancy, whose roots lie in a reference to Article 31 and 32 of the Constitution, made by the Constitutional Court in 1975, and in particular in the affirmation of the non-equivalence, I quote, between the right to life and health of one who is already a person, such as the mother, and the protection of the embryo that has yet to become a person. The termination of pregnancy is therefore linked to Article 2 of the Constitutional Charter and the absolute right of the woman mother. This is why abortion is permitted, because the maternal interest prevails over that of the conceived, who is not yet a person. Thanks to the approval of the 1978 law, the interruption of pregnancy carried out under certain conditions is no longer criminally punishable. The path taken to approve this law was thorny and fraught with obstacles, but the final text respects, at least formally, the principle of women's self-determination, despite the vulnus of the provision for conscientious objection inserted to guarantee the needs of Catholics. It is necessary to reflect on the fact that the result achieved with this law cannot be considered as something established and untouchable over time. And the law has never stopped to be cyclically at the center of debates and controversies, both from those who consider it excessively liberal and in contrast with the sacredness of life, and for those who would instead like it to be enhanced in terms of women's self-determination by abolishing conscientious objection and simplifying bureaucratic procedures. The law of 1978 is certainly a fundamental normative expression of the principle of women's self-determination with respect to the management of their bodies and health. In this context, the provision of the objection, if not exploited and abused, must be interpreted in a favorable sense, insofar as it actualizes the state's protection of the freedom of conscience for all citizens in deference to the pluralist principle that is the cornerstone of democracy. A woman's self-determination and possible objection on the part of medical personnel therefore express the same principle, which is why it is essential for the state to be vigilant so that there is no abuse of the prerogatives of objection, possibly leading to harmful behavior. Excessive and distorted use of objection, in fact, concretely hinders the exercise of a woman's right to choose by opposing the absoluteness of the individual right of the doctor's conscience over that of the woman's free choice, inevitably mortifying the rights of all citizens. And this is, unfortunately, what has happened so far. The fundamental right to health is therefore fulfilled also through the woman's self-determination in the context of a possible termination of pregnancy. And the law guarantees the woman's specificity and protects her psychophysical health. If this is the Italian picture, which is still characterized by various shadows, but also by some lights, it is appropriate just to point out what has happened overseas and to concretely pose the problem of whether or not a woman's right to self-determination in the management of her own body has been achieved, also in the sphere of maternity. First of all, it is worth remembering that the American Constitution does not contain any specific reference to the right to pregnancy termination. Until the early 70s, the termination of pregnancy was therefore regulated by individual states, and in many states it was not possible to terminate pregnancy. The legal framework was strongly changed by landmark US Supreme Court decision versus Wade, which recognized the right to terminate pregnancy throughout the United States. The 1973 ruling concerned the case of Jane Roe against the state of Texas. This woman, protagonist of the case, had had a difficult childhood, had been married from a young age to an abusive man, had given birth to 2 children, and was in the process of a third pregnancy. In addition to this, she regularly abused drugs and was in very poor financial condition. For this reason, the woman requested that she be granted the right to terminate her pregnancy, even though she thought she was in good general health and in the absence of fetal pathologies. On January 1973, the Supreme Court of the United States, with 7 votes in favor and 2 against, ruled in favor of the woman, granting her the request to terminate pregnancy. This right was recognized through a broad interpretation of the right to privacy, to be meant as the right to self-determination in choices concerning the personal sphere, conscious and free choices over which states have no right to intervene. The subject of the right to terminate a pregnancy returned to the attention of the Supreme Court in 1992 with Pennsylvania versus Casey ruling. And the court tried to systemize the right of women to choose about their maternity, going beyond the reference to the right to privacy and referring to the 4th Amendment. The frame of reference established mainly by these 2 Supreme Court interventions, but also by other rulings that had reaffirmed the existence of a woman's right to decide on her own maternity, changed in June 2022, when the Supreme Court ruled that there is no actual right to terminate a pregnancy, leaving the handling of the case to the decision of individual states. The issue arose in 2018 when Mississippi decided to pass a new abortion law that was more restrictive than the 1973 Supreme Court. In the law, under discussion, the practice of abortion was explicitly forbidden after 15 weeks of pregnancy, and also was forbidden in case of rape and sexual violence. The presentation of this project prompted the Jackson Women's Health Organization to file an appeal, and at the end of the judicial process, the matter comes to the attention of the Supreme Court. The court overruling last June was total, as the court, with 6 votes in favor and 3 against, affirmed that the right for women to terminate an unwanted pregnancy is not included in the constitutional chapter. This is true, and is not even rooted in the history and tradition of the United States, considering that in the nation's USA law, just to say the same law that stated the legality of slavery, abortion was criminalized or at least opposed. In short, the court's reasons are the following. The right of women to terminate a pregnancy is not present in the USA Charter, and the interpretation of the Supreme Court that discussed the case Roe versus Wade in 1973 was based on an erroneous foundation, because the right to abortion is not part of the more general right to privacy, and above all, is not deeply rooted in the USA history and tradition. The Supreme Court's ruling of last June is disconcerting for many reasons, among which is the total indifference to the evolution of society in the last 50 years. It seems as feminism, women's struggle, women's empowerment, the discussion on quotas, the gender pay gap, but above all, the affirmation of women's self-determination as a fundamental principle had never existed. Followed up by a huge black hole that wants the woman to be the engine of the earth forever and ever. The disarming reading of the more of 200 pages of the ruling highlights an aspect that could be funny if it were not tragic. It is astonishing that the court's opinion never refers directly to women, as if those affected by this ruling were not women at all, but a subject with no identity, no rights, no capacity for choice, companions for future generations, above and beyond their own will. In fact, the subject around which the court's reasoning revolves is not women, who are completely forgotten, but the unborn human being, the fetus, the conceived. The two subjects are not even set against each other. Simply, the woman does not exist. She is reified, sacrificed on the altar of motherhood. This is an obscure, obtuse, legal and social vision, a reconstruction anchored to a dangerous patriarchal stereotypes that undermine more than half of the human race. Because if women are deprived of decision-making capacity over their own bodies in the United States, it is clear that their subjectivity and capacity can be questioned anywhere. But the effect of this ruling are very likely to go beyond American borders, as demonstrated by the concern expressed by the European Parliament, which in a resolution immediately after the American ruling called for the right to abortion to be affirmed in the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union, as everyone has the right to safe and legal abortion. In fact, the European Parliament's concerns were not only aroused by the USA court decision, but also by the deterioration of women's sex and reproductive health and rights in some European countries. After the Dobbs ruling, it was said that nothing similar could happen in Italy, that the American problem was linked to the fact that the termination of pregnancy had not been affirmed as a right, but linked only to a Supreme Court ruling. However, I believe that the fears of possible backtracking on the subject of the termination of pregnancy, even in my country, our country, are not entirely unfounded. In fact, it must be emphasized that still today in Italy, the interpretation is being affirmed according to which the theoretical axiological model underlying Law 194 is not that of abortion as the expression of a right, but rather a model of rising protection that qualifies it as a choice that cannot be sanctioned only when certain conditions are met. This interpretation is very dangerous because while it is true that Law 194 lays down a series of conditions for the termination of pregnancy, it must be emphasized that these reasons are linked to the termination of pregnancy. These links are linked to the fundamental right to a woman's psychophysical health. Since the treatment in question is a medical treatment, as such, it must be traced back to the woman's capacity for self-determination as the subject concerned. Even asserting that the voluntary termination of pregnancy does not fall within the sphere of personal freedom, but within that of the protection of woman's psychophysical health, does not rule out the woman's free capacity to make decisions, since self-determination is part of any health choice. And when there is self-determination, there is freedom and there is dignity. Only by reasoning in this way can it be said that recourse to the termination of pregnancy closely connected to the right to health under Article 32 of the Italian Constitution. It is itself a right that is mortified whenever women are not given the appropriate information about pregnancy termination practices. In conclusion, the right to health is a fundamental right, and it is also fulfilled through a woman's self-determination in the context of a possible termination of pregnancy. It is not a simple freedom left to the discretion of the legislator, but a true absolute right, connected to the most intimate and delicate sphere of a woman. Women's health is already too often endangered by the false neutrality of medical science. So it is essential that women assert and maintain control over their own bodies and also over motherhood or non-motherhood, a condition related to the physical and psychological sphere of each woman. For this reason, meetings like this are very, very important, because it is our duty as scholars to be vigilant with respect to this essential profile of equality. Thank you for your attention.
For her speech, and of course, there is something to discuss in your speech, but it is, as we are very used to doing, the fact that it is very important to have a radical position and other radical positions, and therefore it would be very interesting to have a discussion on the matter. Let me just remind that sometimes the understanding of abortion in the US is a little bit too hard, because one cannot think that abortion can be performed up to the end of the pregnancy. And I think that our law is really wise in making trimesters, and sometimes at a certain point of the pregnancy, abortion is not anymore. We have to keep in mind that our mentality is very different from the US mentality. Think only to the maternity leave. After 6 days, you have to go to work, back to work. And so we have really to look at the others as sometimes as an example, but sometimes they are something to be criticized. But because focusing only on the privacy right is also something that is not completely good for women, because it's not only a private right, it's also a social right that women's rights need to be protected, not only in the direction of abortion, but also in the direction of labor law and any type of social rights that is needed for having a juster society. Just have to confront the two sides of the pond, and sometimes. And what I have done now is that it is also a situation, it rises to a situation where the two parts, pro-life and pro-choice, started to think a little bit about the real situation of women. Even pro-life started to say that now we have to really work for having a just society, which is directed to the and besides, abortion there is also something that you have to pay for, which is something very tragic for many poor women. We keep on discussing during the coffee break among us and in them, because it's also much easier. So now the floor is Professor Anita Ostalska, something like that, sorry for my bad Polish, PhD Director of the Center for Women and Gender Research, is an educational and sociologist. At the University of Warsaw, she works as a university professor of the Department of Social Pedagogy. Talking about education, we have to learn that is the time, as our said. Her research focused primarily on feminology,
with particular focus on women's biographical and experiences and subjectivity. She is also interested in qualitative research methodology, particularly biographical and research. So there is some much more, many other things to say, but I think that now for us it is important to sometimes it's a little bit moving. So dear Annetta, welcome in Milano, welcome to the seminar, and I give you the floor.
Let me start by saying thank you very much to Professor Maria D'Amico and to the organizers of the conference and all the members of the department of Italian Supranational Public Law at University of Milan. And I have a feeling that we meet in this beautiful city to discuss rights of women, fundamental rights, and today we celebrate the last day of Women's History Month, and this year, under the slogan celebrating women who tell our stories. And I believe that this conference is to share women's stories and celebrate women's rights. And I would like to tell you a story about women in Poland. Exactly 30 years ago, in 1993, in a free Poland, after many years of communist regime, the law limiting access to abortion was introduced. And therefore, today is a good occasion, a good moment to look back and look forward and ask a question whether women are the biggest losers of neoliberalism in Poland. And in this presentation, I will speak about the history of abortion law in recent Poland with a focus on today's situation after the controversial verdict of Constitutional Tribunal in 2020. Okay, so Jane Hardy, in her book Poland's New Capitalism, that was published in 29, argues that the experiences of Polish women in terms of living in and resisting neoliberalism differ from those of women living in the so-called post-communist countries. The collapse of communism in Poland in 1989 led to political and economic transformations, but didn't guarantee the reproduction rights. So when the right-wing party Solidarity came to power in 1989, the intensification of the political significance and role of the Catholic Church began. And unlike the countries of Central and Eastern Europe, the situation of women in Poland worsened in many fields, and one of them was the abortion law. And now in 2023, we are in a place where Poland became the first country in the world to break the liberal trend and withdraw abortion law. And Poland has now one of the most restrictive abortion laws in Europe. Together with Malta, it is one of the 2 European Union member states that has not legalized abortion on request for social rights. In Poland, abortion is permitted now in 2 cases. Number one, when there is a situation of risk to the life or health of a pregnant woman, and number 2, when there is a pregnancy result from a rape or incest, but it should be confirmed by a prosecutor. So in practice, it means that it's almost impossible for women eligible for a legal abortion to obtain one. So women leave Poland to access abortion in other European countries, mainly in Czech Republic and Germany, or import medical abortion pills. Polish women, particularly those in difficult social and economic situations, have to depend on the help from civil society organization. And in recent history of Poland, there were three extremely important moments that changed women's rights to abortion. So let me start with 1956. The abortion law during the communist regime was liberal in Poland. In 1956, for the first time in Polish history, a difficult life situation of a pregnant woman became a sufficient reason for an abortion. And abortion became widely available in public hospitals. And although the majority of Polish society was Catholic, abortion was quite common. The number of abortions per year was on average of 150,000, and it lasted till the end of the 80s. And after the collapse of communism, in 1989, the political situation drastically changed. And in a post-communist country such as Romania or Czechoslovakia, the fall of communism meant the legalization of abortion on demand in the first 10 weeks of pregnancy. In Poland, contrary, abortion law was tightened. And in 1993, Hanna Suchocka became the first female prime minister in Poland's history. And she represented the Democratic Union, so she wasn't very much on the right-wing side. But it was under her government that the abortion law became a kind of a deal, political deal between government and the Catholic Church. And then Deputy Prime Minister for Economic Affairs in Suchocka's government said that it doesn't matter whether there will be capitalism, prosperity, or freedom of speech. The most important thing is that Poland should be Catholic. And in the atmosphere of dominance of the Catholic Church, and of course the personal support of Pope John Paul II, the anti-women's discourse emerged strongly. And the main manifestation was, of course, political efforts to tighten the abortion law and depriving women of the right to decide about themselves and access to legal abortion procedure. The government, despite a public petition that was signed by more than 1 million citizens, didn't hold a referendum of abortion, but directly submitted a bill to the parliament, and the bill was passed. On January 7th, 1993, the Family Planning, Human and Protection and the Condition of Permissibility of Abortion Act entered in force. And it was called the so-called abortion compromise. And it means that the socio-economical grounds for abortion were removed, and in the new law, abortion would be legal only in 3 cases that you can see on the screen. And this law lasted until 2020. And since coming to power in 2015, the Law and Justice Party, that is led by Jarosław Kaczyński, has pursued an anti-gender and anti-women policy. And firstly, through denial of funding women's organization, and then through initiation of the legislative procedures to enact a law banning abortion in all cases and penalizing both women and doctors performing an abortion. The government's actions met with widespread public dissatisfaction, and on September 22nd, 2016, as a result of the Polish Parliament reviewing the draft law project Stop Abortion, the first women's protest was organized under the Sala Black protest. A few days later, thousands of women went on strike to oppose the proposed legislation for a complete abortion ban. The protest was called the Black Monday, and it was a kind of reference to the famous protest in Iceland in 1975. And during the protest, women were calling slogans such as "My body, my choice," or "Abortion is a law, not a commodity." And these slogans were a political voice for regaining a sense of agency and right to decide about one's own body. And according to Polish statistics, almost 100,000 people took part in more than 140 demonstrations. And as a result of these mass protests, on October 6, 2016, the Parliament put down the bill project Stop Abortion. However, the draft of the bill was again on the agenda in April 2020. And during the first lockdown of the COVID pandemic, the controversial project was voted on in the Polish Parliament again. Abortion is a worse pandemic than the coronavirus, claimed the right wing activists presenting the draft abortion law. And due to the social discontent and the risk of protests, the draft was again withdrawn and referred to one of the parliament's committees. And during the next months, when the chances of passing the bill fell, the Constitutional Tribunal was the political body to which the abortion law was referred by right-wing MPs. And in October 2020, the Constitutional Tribunal ruled that abortion due to the fetal defects was unconstitutional. And that means that abortion is prohibited in the case of fetal defects, which according to official data account for 98% of all abortions that are performed in Poland. The decision of Constitutional Tribunal once again caused a huge social discontent, and people took to the street immediately after the verdict was announced. The protests that began as cries for women's reproductive freedom quickly became anti-government demonstrations of different social groups, including LGBT. And because of LGBT involvement in the protest, even the term women's protest became problematic at one point. And since that day, October 22nd, 2020, street protests have taken place all over the country for more than 14 days. And despite the COVID-19 pandemic restrictions, people put their lives at risk and went to the streets to manifest their objections to depriving women of their fundamental rights. On October 28th, there was a nationwide women's strike under the slogan, "I'm not going to work." And according to the Polish statistic, that time it was 430,000 people that participated in more than 400 demonstrations in the whole country. Next days, the protests continued, and on October 30th, around 100,000 people participated in a massive protest in Warsaw, and this protest was called "Everyone to Warsaw." And the women's protests were labeled the Women's Revolution, as one of the protest slogans was "Revolution is a woman." And that time, at the end of 2020, a real change for social and political change appeared. A new history in Poland began with women's strike, and from a feminist point of view, it was a grassroots feminist movement. Women's protest can be interpreted as an East European feminist term. In particular, the manifestation of the slogan "Personal is political." And by protesting against anti-abortion law, women called for a space in the public sphere to articulate their rights as fundamental human rights. In October 2020, with its massive protest, were a historical turning point. Women's strike were the first mass mobilization in many years in Poland, the biggest since the Solidarity movement in 1980s. Of course, social demonstrations related to reproductive and women's rights have been organized in Poland since the early 1990s, but women's strikes in October 2020 have become unique in many ways. And the protests were massive and radical social uprising of young generations of Polish people. So women's strikes even were called youth protests if we consider the demographic composition and the protesters' language. People who dominated the women's protests were people who didn't know the word and Poland before the collapse of communist regime. And as some commentators said, this is a different rebellion and a different revolution, and maybe it is the rebellion of the first generation born and raised in Western civilization. And what is important that these protests were quite different than women's protests in 2016. People sang, people danced, joy and anger were intertwined during the demonstrations. And the slogans were distinguished by spontaneity and the range of popular culture references. On the one hand, and on the other hand, it was a radicalization of the language. There was a lot of vulgarity and offensive language. We can say that this slogan questioned strong gender stereotypes, including that language is not for women or girls. However, this profanity or vulgarity gained a specific meaning because it was to express what was inexpressible. Anger, particularly at government, that is built on hatred and homophobia. And what's now? 30 years have passed since the introduction of the abortion law in Poland and 3 years since the judgment of the Constitutional Tribunal. Where are we now? Women's strikes seems like a distant story. Although social discontent with government policy remains still very high, there is a sense of disappointment around. And we ask ourselves again whether women have lost a struggle for abortion rights in Poland again. Since the publication of the tribunal's judgment, 6 pregnant women have died due to the lack of medical assistance because the hospital delayed the abortion because of the fear of breaking the ruling of the Constitutional Tribunal. So physicians, medical professionals are afraid to perform abortions, even in those situations where abortion still remains legal. So it's almost impossible to perform a legal abortion in Poland. While in 1990s, the abortion underground developed quite quickly, now women cross borders to Germany and Czech Republic for help. The statistics provided directly by non-governmental organizations estimate that only last year more than 1,200 people went abroad to terminate their pregnancies. But what about women who cannot afford going abroad? So the so-called home abortion is available through the work of NGOs such as women on the web or women help women. Because according to Polish law, pharmacological abortion is allowed. In the situation, the support network of pro-choice initiatives has developed. One of them is Abortion Dream Team, which is a group of Abortion Without Borders, the international initiative organization set up to help people access abortion, either at home with pills or abroad in clinics. And according to Abortion Dream Team, during the last year, the organization had more than 40,000 people to access pharmacological abortion. Women in Poland can technically order pills via internet. However, problems may arise when a third party, such as a friend or husband, helps women to buy pills. Because according to Polish law, aiding access to abortion is punishable by law. And one of the activists of the Abortion Dream Team, Justyna Wydrzyńska, was accused of aiding in a pharmacological abortion. The trial against her lasted more than a year, and the verdict, saying guilty of helping, was just announced in March this year. And all these events and experiences have contributed to significant increase of the social awareness of the consequences of anti-abortion law. Public opinion polls say that in 2022, as many as the 70% Polish population believe that a woman should have the right to an abortion up to the 12th week of pregnancy. And this is the highest figure recorded so far in Poland. What is interesting is that we observe a huge increase in support for abortion among young men between the age of 18 and 39. So it is positive, but since February 2022, when Russia's aggression against Ukraine began, the abortion has also concerned refugee women from Ukraine that cross the borders of Poland. And Ukrainian women had access to legal abortion in Ukraine, but not in Poland. So their rights to abortion are not respectable in Poland. And war in Ukraine made women's rights invisible and unimportant on the one hand, but at the same time, a valuable issue on the other hand. And in a way, we are now back in 1993. There is a social support for abortion law, but women's rights are the currency we pay in politics. So particularly, it is the issue in the context of next year parliamentary election in Poland. So it seems that now, in 2023, a question of whether women are the biggest losers of political transformation is still valid, and reproductive justice is our past, our present, and our future. Thank you.
Thank you very much also to our guest and now we have third executive, my dear Rita Elkayat, anthropologist, psychiatrist from Milan. And the floor is yours. Welcome to Milan.
Morning, everyone. Good.
morning, everyone. So you have this cover book.
That is a master.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. So, good morning, and thank you for the invitation. You have this, the volume of this book published more than a year ago in very treatment of all kinds of violence throughout various cultures. And yes, we're coming from Africa, living partly in the so-called Maghreb, as a region of Arab Islamic world. It's a very complex and diverse world, but at the same time, so similar and so comparable between 22 Arab countries and 57 Islamic ones. Women in that country are drawn in the ocean of feminine insoluble problems. For example, since the beginning of Islam, the feminine inherits house in comparison with men. It's an impoverishment lasting 15 years. It's a traditional economical violence. It means that a female is less than a male, deserving half. This is the same for legal testimony. Even in front of the parliament, it's under women's rights violation. I give my own example. As a physician with psychiatrist, I have had deliveries. I circumcised boys during my medical training, even if not convinced by this mutilation. I signed the certificate. I have certificate of legal incapacity. I can certify a person permanently unfit for work, but my testimony counts is worth half than of an military man. The meaning of that fact is very complex. The women is considered as mentally less strong than the man. She therefore less fit for full responsibility. She is never fully mature, so she has to be protected by man and all else. It's why, for example, our police women don't have women. This is a traditional conception and psychological violence against women's rights. I mean that this is the root and essence of all violence against women's rights. It goes very far. My testimony as a woman is have to follow in a cult, even if I am sworn in regarding medical expertise. Regarding abortion, it is not mentioned. In the context of the country, it's quite impossible even to pronounce the term feminine body, to evoke the right of sexual life. Article 490 of the Moroccan Penal Code punishing sexual relations outside marriage with imprisonment. There is no non-binary. Male homosexuality is a crime punished by jail. Article 489. But lesbianism makes love as feminine sexuality is despised and at best ignored. Marital rape is not a crime and it's not punished. The rape done or single woman had to marry the rapist until the suicide in 2012 of 15 more African condemned to very, very fast, so that he will not be prosecuted according to the Article 475, the Penal Code. Family-friendly safe space, as the victim is no longer married by a man. Worse, the term abortion is never pronounced even if there are lots of people fighting for this right, and the strict restrictions and the possible amendments that the fetal malformations, danger to the life of the mother, incest, rape, and just for this cases. Associations are fighting for that amendments without results and denial. It's forbidden to make an abortion even if the fetus is dead. The coping mother has to wait until the end of the pregnancy to be delivered. It is dangerous for the mother, but if she is delivered before the time of pregnancy, it's considered as an abortion, a crime. The most interesting is to know that there is a deep, total, indisputable refusal to perform an abortion by the woman pregnant herself and with the authorization of the husband, even if the pregnancy is not desired at all. The law doesn't even have to act. God forbids killing the fetus because it's alive. This concerns the maximum share of the population. 600 until 900 illegal abortions are made and performed every day more. Forced underground, Moroccan women are taking even more risk since 2018, the ban on after and inexpensive abortive drugs. Traditional techniques are very dangerous. Substances obtained from herbalists can cause infection, damage the genitals, cause fetal malformation. Even illegal abortions that form in medical offices are often performed in very poor conditions because they are supplied. Of course, we have a lot of people, a lot of physicians, gynecologists that are in jail. I think that here we are far from Western problems concerning abortion. We are in the European Middle region, burning witches, because the life of a woman who has an illegal abortion in our country always forced to keep her child without being married is somewhere burned. Nowadays, as we are living in the global village, facing huge differences, it seems quite impossible to create harmony between all of us. I wonder how we can have a better life together in the future, considering such a huge cultural differences between humans and their consumption. Why this affirmation? Because human rights must be the same for all humanity, and they must be respected everywhere in the world, knowing that women's rights are powerless to very be violated in all countries. The life person depends on the location where the girl is born. I give always the same example. At this same second, right now, two girls come to life in Sudan and in Sweden. The Swedish covered by all laws and hygiene and all social protection.
the Sudanese can die in the 2 first years of their life due to lack of children protection and health care. She is to be less fed than a boy, less privileged, less educated and instructed, and she is to be tortured by genital mutilations around 7 years. Genital mutilations are not considered crimes against humanity. Of course, they concern girls across the globe, more or less is fine. So we can say some words about Western countries versus Africa and Islamic world. My main goal today, all of you, is to explain how the advanced countries are still facing important problems like those concerning women, their rights, and overall development. Western countries are just solving the fact. Women in advanced countries suffer from the remnants of patriarchal domination that appear in the way they treat women's bodies to prevent them from still freeing themselves and above all, prevent them from controlling their fertility. As anthropologist, I can say that contraception is the most important revolution in the feminine condition, leading maybe in the far future, total equality between men and women. I use for that study mainly historical data, ethnopsychiatry, anthropology, and psychoanalysis that have served my mental work and opera to make sense. The differences in conception of the condition of women and of women's rights are extremely variable depending on the country, their religions, and their culture, including, of course, their traditions. Europe and the United States have slowly emerged from patriarchy, masculine and violent debates, without having achieved full equality between men and women. Political field is an important example, field where women are very far from having parity, even in the most advanced countries. Real democracy should bring the possibility for all women to demand control of their fertility, which is the essential problem of femininity, since they conceive and bear children inside their body. It is this body, interiority, that is in question here. The body of girls and women belongs to them. It is free and inviolable. It doesn't belong to states, not to religions, nor to a man, father or husband, not to a family or a tribe. The female body is not hosting the harmony of the tribe. It's very long to explain how the whole masculine one is created. I can resume that, starting from the boy in a toddler going to God. The power of the religion and its daily exercise in the family and in the society lead to situations as caricatural as those of the so-called traditional countries, and still extremely skilled in religiosity as in certain Latin American countries. We know the tragic example of El Salvador. While abortion is about to be banned in the United States, current events remind us that the right is fragile. Regularly freedom between countries and still illegal in so many. Many doctors refuse to confront abortions as a right of refusal. In the countries where it is legal, like in Italy, and this is awful. We don't have nothing. In 2022, the figures are frightening according to the Center for Reproduction Rights, the World Organization for the Defense of Human Rights, and in particular reproductive rights. Listen, there are more than 25 million clandestine and dangerous abortions in the world each year, and 41% of women childbearing age still live in countries with restriction. We have countries where abortion is possible on request, those where abortion is only permitted under certain conditions, countries where abortion depends on federal states of origin, and countries where abortion is totally illegal, like in Egypt. And Egypt, you know that there is an Azhar, this famous Vatican, that is that made fatwa, and Egypt forbid not only in Egypt abortion, but in the world of Islamic world. We feel like this, that there are huge differences between countries. It's not a global women's rights movement, if not, sorry, a global women's rights movement. Many women are doomed to live absurd medieval lives. The contrary, there are traditions, tribal laws, and conceptions of male and female roles, formally excluding the deviations from normality. Traditions feed on religion, which feeds on tradition. We can see that in the Arab Islamic countries, 1.5 billion. These countries did not decide to apply secularism as a mode of governance. Religion is permanent life, day and night, in which believers flourish. We have to face this evidence, even as Western societies benefit from democracy and secularism, they remain linked to their past, largely influenced by former conceptions of life, death, fate, destiny, and providence. Irrational fears remain deeply rooted in all Western countries where religion tries to still have the power. The mixing of culture is working today, and in the future, impossible to be foreseen, centuries, maybe millennia, we have to be protected by the same human rights over the world. All of the living, working, searching in developed countries have to know this. Unless you help, it's impossible for the so-called traditional countries to evolve. The danger is to have a world constituted and led by a double direction movement. Don't forget, please, forget also the enormous part of migrants in Western societies willing to have the same rights and traditions they have in their countries that because it was a burden to live in. This is an aphoria, something that cannot be demonstrated. In conclusion, women's rights are essential for the progress of all humankind. They reflect the level of development or the development of a country. Controlled by the results of the community constitute a universal right for all women. The politics and the laws have to be influenced by female points of view. It's available to live under a package of patriarchal dictates. And when women acceded to the political power, they act just like men. They didn't feminize politics, I'm just to keep femininity. And please, remember that our future is strictly and totally forged and planned by all of us, by what we do today.
Thank you very much for the situation is really worrying. We are aware that part of the time in such a situation this was one of the reasons why I trusting the idea of getting into work. I put the case of Pakistan, because Pakistan apparently it goes even for international issues. They are working in a good way to improve the condition of women. But I don't know if it is really true, because also in Asia, the situation are absolutely worrying for everybody. Which is why this meeting is so important, because we have to raise our awareness about what is going on and not on our problems, which seems sometimes very, very important, but indeed they are the problems of the rich. So I think we are done for the first session today, and in the afternoon there will be 4 speakers online, 3 speakers online, starting at 4. Okay, 3 starting at 4. 4 starting at 3. Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you to all the organizers, the people who worked with Marzo and organized this meeting. And at one there is lunch for everybody. Okay, where? Here? Yeah. Okay, so we have you can relax a little bit. Ciao.